hope that they are going to fully understand the gravity of what I said. And what I said is what I mean. So hopefully they'll understand, Peter, exactly what I said and the meaning of those words. Those words are very, very easy to understand.
Locked and loaded. Those are the words the president is referring to. President Trump warning North Korea that U.S. military solutions are now fully in place if the rogue nation decides to launch any missiles at U.S. interests. So what happens now? Welcome, everyone. I am Trish Regan, in for Neil Cavuto, and this is Your World. We've got Fox team coverage with Rick Leventhal traveling with the president in Bridgewater, New Jersey, and Lucas Tomlinson at the Pentagon. Let's begin here with Rick. Hey, Rick.
Trish, the president has seized every single opportunity this week to speak on camera about his displeasure with Kim Jong-un and North Korea and the threats at possibly launching nukes at U.S. territories, including Guam. And you heard it just minutes ago, the president once again lashing out. Here's some more of what he said.
And this man will not get away with what he's doing, believe me. And if he utters one threat in the form of an overt threat, which, by the way, he has been uttering for years and his family has been uttering for years, or if he does anything with respect to Guam or any place else that's an American territory or an American ally, he will truly regret it, and he will regret it fast.
The president had numerous meetings scheduled today, including one with his National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, and another an hour from now with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and the U.S. Ambassador to the U.N., Nikki Haley. And no doubt North Korea will be the focus of those meetings. Of course, the president's attacks on Kim Jong-un began after word leaked out that North Korea had developed the ability to miniaturize nuclear weapons and put them on missiles. And when the North Korean dictator threatened to attack Guam, the president doubled down on his earlier fire and fury comments, saying he didn't go far enough. And Trish, you mentioned this morning the president's tweet when he said military solutions are now fully in place, locked and loaded, should North Korea act unwisely. Hopefully Kim Jong-un will find another path. Well, earlier today, North Korea released a statement of its own saying it considered the U.S. no more than a lump which we can beat to a jelly at any time. It's important to note that there are no indications that the president is planning to make any kind of preemptive military strike against North Korea, which would immediately put Seoul at risk and the millions of people who live there, along with many Americans. So right now it appears to be a back and forth between these two leaders, a verbal and written back and forth. We're going to have to wait and see what happens next.
All right. Thank you so much, Rick. The U.S. Pacific Command tweeting out B-1 bombers on Guam are ready to fight tonight if called upon. Lucas Tomlinson is at the Pentagon with more on that. Lucas, they're ready.
Well, that's right, Trish. These are supersonic B-1 bombers. They carry the largest conventional payload of any bomber in the Air Force. There are currently 6 of these B-1 bombers on the island of Guam. But it's noteworthy, Trish, that there are no U.S. Navy aircraft carriers or Marine Expeditionary units off the coast of Korea right now. This all comes after President Trump tweeted a photo showing U.S. Air Force B-1 bombers in Guam and said U.S. forces in the region were, quote, locked and loaded. Following a series of propaganda films from North Korea, the Pentagon today released a motivational video of its own starring Admiral Harry Harris, head of Pacific Forces.
The United States is going to remain a powerful leader in the Indo-Asia-Pacific. And our joint forces will continue a robust and persistent presence in the region, just as we routinely have for over 7 decades.
The Ronald Reagan Strike Group returned to Japan this week following a 3-month deployment, but could return to sea in a matter of days if called upon, according to officials, who also say there has not been a request to send more naval assets to the region. Now, there are dozens of forward-deployed Navy destroyers, cruisers, along with the aircraft carrier to go along with the roughly 50,000 U.S. troops in Japan right now and about 30,000 in South Korea. Now, other bombers could be sent to the region. Some can strike North Korea from the United States. Before leaving office in January, then President Obama ordered a B-2 strike in Libya against an ISIS training camp. The bombers took off from an Air Force base in Missouri and flew around the world and were refueled 15 times en route. Another option for President Trump as he deals with this North Korea threat, Trish.
All right. Thank you very much, Lucas. 64 House Democrats signing on to this letter to Secretary of State Rex Tillerson condemning President Trump's statements on North Korea. In the letter, they express, quote, profound concern over the president's statements, calling them irresponsible and dangerous. Shouldn't they be condemning the actions of North Korea? With me right now, retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel Bob Maginnis. Colonel Maginnis, thanks for being here. Interesting, it's only Democrats on this that are condemning the president's words.
Well, we're not surprised, Trish. There's not much bipartisan cooperation in this city of late. 60 Democrats going after Mr. Trump is, so what's new? It's unfortunate that we can't get bipartisan support when you are talking about the national security and a threat from a rogue regime like North Korea. However, that's what happens. Now, of course, the Democrats would have us engage with caution and patience and, those sorts of things that have got us to where we are today. It started with Mr. Clinton, went through President Bush, then President Obama, and, we tried to give them all sorts of goodies. We tried sanctions, and now, of course, we're at a point, obviously based upon the posts released this week, of miniaturization of nuclear weapons. Of course, going back as far as 2002, Secretary Powell told the world that, he thought at that time there were 2 in their possession. So they've just been adding to their arsenal, becoming more dangerous with their ballistic missiles.
And we've allowed them to do so, Colonel.
And we have. A decade ago, I was on this network, and I said, look, we can't allow this to go any further. We need to put our foot down because it's going to be tragic if we don't deal with this problem. And yet, everybody promises to do something, and we are where we are today, concerned about Guam, concerned about the west coast of the United States, concerned that we can't predict, and of course our so-called cooperative friends in Russia and China, they aren't abrogating their treaties and their alliances with this rogue regime, which is really not abating, but encouraging this sort of behavior. This has got to stop. This is serious.
There's much more that we can and probably should be doing when it comes to China so that we get them to exert some pressure. But back to this letter, the fact that it is becoming so political, how does that strike you? I mean, it seems to me that at a time like this, Colonel, you need to be united. We need to be united as a country, and we don't need the likes of, whether it be Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or any of the others out there saying that our president is somehow bombastic because he is telling the North Koreans there are consequences to your actions.
Yeah, Trish, I was in this studio on the night of 9/11. I recall the unity I felt and sensed across this nation as we were hurting from the loss of thousands of Americans. We're facing a very serious threat here, folks. We need to come together. This partisan stuff on the Hill and across the country does not help us as a nation. It makes us look weak internationally. And in a time where we're facing rogue regimes there in Persian Gulf, terrorism around the world, as well as a rising threat from China and Russia, we can no longer afford to be bickering amongst ourselves. Rather, we ought to be pulling together and look outward.
Absolutely. Well, Colonel, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Trish.
Stocks breaking a 3-session losing streak, but still down for the week. Nonetheless, ending up there, you can see about 14 points. The Dow, NASDAQ, and S&P 500 all finishing there in the red, down 1.1% on the Dow. It all started today, or rather Tuesday, with a report, of course, that North Korea was developing a miniature warhead and threatened the U.S., and that was followed by the president's fire and fury comments, and so that rattled people a little bit. Investors, they sought some safety in gold and in treasuries, and gold wound up hitting its highest level since early June. And the yield on the 10-year note treasury dropping to its lowest level in 6 weeks. So it shows you that people are really getting into those safety vehicles. But little upside today. Barack Obama's national security advisor now admitting their North Korea policy failed. Reaction from House Armed Services Committee Trent Franks next. And this protest hitting a little too close to home for one Republican lawmaker because it was literally at his home. Minnesota Congressman Jason Lewis calling it an invasion of privacy. The protesters say since he won't hold town halls, it was a necessity. The congressman is here to respond.
When people with disabilities are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back. When our grandparents
Barack Obama's former national security advisor, Susan Rice, admitting that America's past policy with North Korea was a failure.
The North Korean regime has been able to succeed in progressing with its program, both nuclear and missile. That's very unfortunate outcome. You can call it a failure. I accept that characterization of the efforts of the United States over the last 2 decades.
All right, reaction right now from Republican House Armed Services Committee member Trent Franks. Good to have you here.
Thank you for
what's your reaction to that? She's admitting effectively that the last administration and frankly administrations before it all failed, because here we are now.
Well, I don't think she had any choice but to admit that. What probably should be even more clarified is that the capability of North Korea now to target U.S. citizens with nuclear warheads was facilitated at least by the deals that Bill Clinton and Barack Obama made with the North Koreans. And yet I hear a lot of my friends on the left attacking President Trump almost more than they do the North Korean leaders. And the reality is that President Trump is doing something that is very important right now, and that is making it absolutely clear to the North Koreans that it's in their best interest not to attack United States citizens or any United States territory. And the reason that's so important, Trish, is because our war fighters have to game this out. And now that North Korea has become this, has this capability of nuclear weapons, and they have this rhetoric that they have had, we don't know whether it's rhetoric or what it is, they have to game this out and assume that it will escalate into some type of nuclear attack by North Korea if a war of some kind starts. Consequently, that means we would have to move quickly to neutralize that.
Fundamental differences in terms of Susan Rice and how she thinks about this and how the previous administration thought about North Korea, in that she just had a New York Times op-ed the other day in which she effectively said, yeah, we can live with a nuclear North Korea. We can. Mutually assured destruction, much as we did with the Soviets. To which I would say, and I think most would say, no, we can't and we shouldn't have to. But nonetheless, Congressman, here we are now. So do you think many of those members of the left that are taking aim at the president right now for a variety of political reasons also have a fundamental difference in terms of how they view North Korea?
I think they do. I don't think they realize how dangerous this situation is. North Korea has gone, I've been on the Strategic Nuclear Forces Committee for 15 years, and their progress over those years has been really frightening. But recently, under Barack Obama, they tested nuclear warheads 4 times, and they tested missiles 11 times. So their capability has dramatically progressed. And I will say to you that for them to be attacking this president is absolutely astonishing to me. This president is doing what's necessary to make sure when he says locked and loaded, I can suggest to you that that's a pretty accurate description of our status at this point. But I think it's very important that we realize that the North Korean economy is about $13 to $14 billion. And that means our economy is probably 1,000 to 1,500 times that size.
Of course.
And that's an asymmetry that we need to use very significantly in this moment.
Yes, well, look, I've heard a variety of different estimates, everything from $13 billion to $28 billion. It's hard to really know, but when you think of the $1 billion worth of sanctions, I don't think that's enough. I think we can do a whole lot more. I think China can do a whole lot more, both in terms of enforcing those sanctions and in terms of offering a whole lot more up. But let me play devil's advocate right now.
We need to do that. We need to do that, Trish. We need to make sure that anybody that trades with North Korea, we need to tell them you can trade with them or the United States. It's up to you, because we're serious about a regime change. We're serious about making sure that this country can no longer threaten the peace and security of the world community.
Congressman, what do you say to those members of the left and, frankly, some members of the right, especially those that do not like this president in the Conservative Party, that feel that he is upping the ante, so to speak? In other words, he is giving voice to those in North Korea who want to believe that America is out to destroy them in some way. How do you respond to those accusations?
Well, very simply, this strategic weakness and the kinds of things that have happened heretofore have brought us to the moment that we're in. And President Trump understands that, and he's making it very clear to North Korea that it's not in their best interest to attack us. And I don't know of any more important single thing that he can do other than, as I've said, to immediately pursue an overwhelming sanctions effort to isolate North Korea and see that regime fall, and make sure this time that any deals that we make require the dismantlement of their capability rather than, you know, paying their ransom and not securing the hostage.
Indeed. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Trish.
Loud protests right outside the home of a Minnesota Republican congressman. The group defending it. The congressman outraged by it. He's here next.
We are here because our Medicaid matters. Our Medicaid matters. Our Medicaid matters. Our Medicaid matters. And thus we are here to make sure that Congressman Lewis's neighbors know exactly why we are here. Woo! So let me hear you cheer. Let me hear you cheer so loud that the entire community here will hear us and know exactly why we are here. Come on, everybody, cheer!
Protesters in Minnesota taking their demands to the family home of Republican Congressman Jason Lewis. Upset that he hasn't held a town hall on health care. The group Take Action Minnesota marched right to his front door. And today the group is defending that. That statement in a moment.